really, what we want to kind of focus on with guidance is the role of a coach within a practice situation. So the role of a coach or of a trainer in a practice scenario. So we're kind of assuming that we've got a brilliant practice session set up. We've got some kind of skill practice, something we want to achieve, and we're looking at the different ways in which a coach can get information over to the learners or the athletes that that coach is working with. So what's the role of the coach, and how can they go about performing this role in different ways? And basically we're going to look at 4 ways, okay? We're going to look at 4 methods of guidance, four methods of guiding athletes to the information they need. And the first of those is what we refer to as visual guidance. So let me give you some information and characteristics of visual guidance. And, straight away linking back to the concept of the cognitive phase or the cognitive stage of learning, we can think that visual guidance means some form of demonstration. In fact, let me actually write the term demonstration in. Will create a mental picture. A mental picture. And we already know that a mental picture is essential for early stage learners developing an awareness of what a skill should be like. So a demonstration creates this mental picture. And of course we can see that on this image, right? These people, hopefully with this tennis player and coach providing a good stimulus for a visual representation of what a volley should look like in tennis. These athletes, these players, are generating this mental picture of that performance so that later they can replicate it. So the demonstration is absolutely critical to that process for obvious reasons. A couple of things about demonstrations. The version we've got in the image is what we'd call a live demonstration. Okay, we see that. It's actually happening there in front of them. But don't forget that that live demonstration could potentially either be supported or replaced by a video. I guess in some little ways it's not dissimilar to using a video tutorial like this one for a lesson structure as opposed to a live lesson. And maybe kind of more old school ways are things like a poster that might adorn a changing room wall or a passageway or whatever. These are ways of representing the key facets of the skill. So we also want to say with regard to the demonstration, and this is a really important point of course, is that quality is important. We can't just demonstrate any old garbage. We actually need a technically correct, go back to our characteristics of skill, a technically correct, recognizable performance which provides the correct stimulation for the learner. So it's really important, that bit. As I've said already, we're really interested in cognitive stage learners here, although demonstrations at different stages can be very, very useful, but we find particularly with cognitive stage or cognitive phase learners that visual guidance is particularly relevant. I would say in general, kind of base starter information through guidance for cognitive stage learners is more important than say autonomous stage learners, but we really see the mental picture aspect of this with the cognitive stage learners. And the other point I'd make, and it's really the point I'm going to make at the summary of this recording, is that we combine this method with other methods. I'm going to refer to combined with CPs. Now all I want you to know at this stage, we'll go into this very shortly, is that CP just stands for coaching points. So this coach here isn't just going to demonstrate and say nothing. They're going to demonstrate and describe some of the key things that they have done, the key highlights of what they're looking for. So that's what we mean by visual. We now want to think about the notion of verbal. And again, this relates to what I've just said. We've got to think about coaching points. Verbal guidance, okay, we might do things like encouraging, we might do things like praise, but really we're talking about technical coaching points for the improvement of skill. That's what we mean with verbal guidance. It's a series of coaching points, not too many all in one go, but in the essence of this, it's what we describe as a description. Okay, so it is a verbal description of the skill, and we can kind of see that here in this image. This guy here is describing what he wants from his players. I'm not sure how much attention they're paying, but this guy here is describing to his players what he wants out of them, presumably at the start of the second half or whatever it is in this particular circumstance. Again, I mentioned this concept here. Quality is important. Again, quality is important. Not just any old coaching points, not inaccurate coaching points, but absolutely sound, reliable and relevant coaching points. So quality is important. Lots of people think that they can coach. Lots of people think that they know a sport. Lots of people think that they can describe, how something should be. But there's actually only very few that can not only know that material, but get it across in a coherent and relevant way for the people that you're working with. And of course, these are ultimately children. The way this coach actually describes these coaching points to these children is going to need to be relevant to children and the way they think and the way they see the world, right? I mean, it makes sense. This is an interesting point. I wonder if you can grasp this already. We might say that something like a series of coaching points, it replaces kinesthesis. Remembering that kinesthesis is the internal sense of correct motion, that you are performing a movement correctly or not. Well, what we're saying with coaching points is if there are errors in someone's technical performance, a coaching point can help correct those errors if they don't feel the error themselves, okay? And because of that, we would describe it as a replacement of this intrinsic mechanism and for an extrinsic form of feedback. So it's an extrinsic form of feedback. So just linking it into that feedback topic, which you may or may not have studied yet. Look at the playlist if you're unsure what I'm talking about with that one. Okay, so on to our third example of guidance. We're now going to talk about manual guidance. And for this, I've got an image of some dancers. Here, and what we see here is that this coach is actually physically manipulating the athlete, or in this case the dancer. Okay, so the first thing we want to say is that manual guidance is physical manipulation, which sounds very threatening and unpleasant, but actually no, it's actually quite a useful method within a trusting and appropriate coach-learner relationship. Okay, so it's physical manipulation. So what we mean by that is that we can actually help someone that isn't in the right position, someone that isn't showing the correct technique, someone that's recognizably technically accurate. We can move them into that position. I've chosen dance. It could be a whole range of many different performances that this would be relevant for. And the reason it works well is it increases our proprioception. Okay, our proprioception. It increases our intrinsic awareness of what the skill should feel like, because someone's putting us into the right position, so we might be more likely to replicate that in the future. As I said already, it also helps to correct errors. So it helps to corrects errors. Okay, so that is very useful. And finally, as I've said already with this proprioception point, it gives us the feeling of the correct skill. So okay, even if we're not at that point ready to perform the skill correctly ourselves, we can get the feeling of the correct skill because we're put into the correct position, if that makes some kind of sense to you. So that's our manual guidance. And very finally, just bear with me one moment, we're going to talk about the concept of mechanical guidance. I just want you to pay attention to this image first of all. We've got a trampolinist here, gymnast, who of course here is attached here to a harness, and this harness presumably is going to help support this young person going through some kind of somersaulting experience. So the first thing to say about mechanical guidance is that we have to sort of meet this form of guidance, we have to use some kind of mechanical aid. Now, I've used the example of a harness. I mean, it can be all kinds of things. It can be as simple as putting some cones and some barriers out to make someone dodge and weave appropriately, for example. It can be something as simple as in a coaching scenario that we would provide some kind of stimuli within the coach scenario which elicits a response from the performer. It doesn't have to be that you're tied to some elastic cord. It can be something very, very simple. The reasons we do it, let me give you another one in this specific example. In this trampolining example, another way of doing it, it meets this point I'm writing now of safety. It could be that the performer doesn't use the harness, they try their somersault, and as they're up in the air, a crash mat is pushed in underneath them. That would be another example of mechanical guidance, an aid to bring about safety in their performance while they try something which is quite challenging. So we also say that it really helps to increase confidence. That makes sense with the safety point, right? Doing a somersault is scary. I've done a couple on a trampoline in my time, and it is a little bit scary. And it provides that sense of security, if you like, sense of confidence. And my very last point for this recording, before I do a summary, is that mechanical guidance, it helps provide accuracy. Okay, it helps provide accuracy. So if you think about the harness example here, that harness is guiding this young athlete through the correct range of motion to produce the skill. All right, very final points. Let me drag you back up to the top to make these points. Very final points. Guidance in real coaching sessions is always a combination. So you will never, ever see someone demonstrate a skill in total silence without using verbal guidance as a conjoining supplementary process within that situation. You will very, very frequently see a coach demonstrate something, allow some practice, and then go and use some manual or mechanical guidance or some verbal guidance. They might even demonstrate it again. This is what good coaching is. It's just choosing the right moment and the right instruction and the right stimuli to provide the best information for learners. Thanks for listening.